So I made my first mistake last night. Now, the orange piece here that makes up the muzzle for both the barrel and the front of the flashlight, I chopped it off. And you can see I just followed this line from where I'd already chopped something down so that the triad would fit. Well, set that aside, put the triad head in place, and you can see it really doesn't match up. It doesn't meet up with the triad. There's a nice big open gap there. So, truth is, I didn't think about that one too carefully. In fact, I could probably even let the orange piece here extend a little further up, leave a little more of the blue shell. So when I make a second one of these, I will definitely take that into consideration, and that part will hopefully be much cleaner. As is, this is already a very clean integration, but that's something to examine. Of course, you may decide to do something different with it entirely. I can tell you that there isn't a whole lot of this to work with. Wow, this lighting's crap for showing you this piece. But we run out of this blue ring. I'll call it a muzzle cap. We run out of that as soon as this big square piece that's normally hidden under the shell meets with it. So there isn't too much higher that I can actually cut cleanly without having this big ugly piece start to show up on the outside. But it's something to consider. Hey folks, so a couple of things I'm going to cover in this segment. First is this orange piece here that fills in this slot. It looks like it's part of the plunger tube, but it is not. It is part of a pronged piece that attaches on both sides that hooks onto the plunger and barrel assembly. Well, I don't need this front part, obviously, so I cut it off. That leaves me with these two prongs, if you want to call them that. When you pull the blast, well, the thing is, these are held in now, essentially, by the plunger tube itself. I'm going to hot glue them in with just a couple of beads of hot glue, because if I ever want to take this apart to paint it, I don't want to have to tape this off. I want to be able to just pull it out, and hot glue in small amounts will let me do that. And so you'll notice I just cut it short, and these actually will slot right in. Let's see here. Man, I wish humans had 3 hands sometimes. Put it together. Make sure it's going the right direction. I pushed it in a little too far there. But you'll notice I actually even cut it a little shorter than you'd think I'd want to. That's because when I attach the triad head, I've got these little bumps in the back, and I really don't want to shave them down, because then, well, that will be visible. So that gives that room to sit in there, like that. The next thing I want to show you, as I take this apart, you'll see these pieces just fell out. There's one. Where's the other? Well, I'll find that later. I need the airflow to go from here into the bottom of the triad head, which means I'm going to have to loop it around with a little piece of pipe or tubing. And in order to do that, I may have to remove this post. It is not a screw post, it's just a structural post. I might have to remove this. Additionally, I was going to leave the rubber seal in that seals up the inner and outer shell right here. But the thing is, when I stuck that in there, it just stuck too far down into the blaster, ran into the dart holder here, the orange piece. So I pulled that out. I'm just going to stick in some rubber cement or hot glue around the edges, and then attach the airflow pipe. When I pull out the plunger tube, you'll notice I'm dremeling this hole in here. Now you're going to notice the orientation I have. I have the one of the 3 support posts up here on top, and I'm drilling this hole down in this open spot. The rest of this is going to be filled as dead space, including much of this inner portion here. I'm going to wind a pipe an air pipe through here to the plunger. So the way I'm doing that is I'm using this conical grinding bit. And something I'll warn you about, the plastic does melt when exposed to that kind of friction for a bit of a period of time, so you might get some strings. It's really hard to pull off the excess after you grind it up, but definitely worth it. And before I put this together, I may do some experiments to see if that air hole is big enough. On to the next segment. Since I want this blaster to be able to fire essentially any kind of stock dart it comes across, I chopped down the dart posts. Now I know that they do actually improve air delivery to the dart, so I didn't remove them completely, but I chopped them just short enough that they should certainly be able to use stock streamlines, classic streamlines, if the user ever has to scavenge off the floor and find some of those. He should still definitely be able to fire them with the posts chopped down. I'm not expecting him to use homemade darts at all, so I don't think he'll be using slugs, which is why I'm leaving them there. So that is something, depending on your setup, especially if you plan to rebarrel your Triad with brass, this is totally up to you how far down you cut this. Even if you made this thing a shotgun and removed them entirely, including the air restrictors, again, totally up to you, but this is what I did. And I'm going to take some sandpaper and round these heads off just a little bit. You can see that I'm shaving away at this bottom portion at the back of the Triad head. You can actually shave away a pretty decent amount. You don't want to go to the point that you cut into the inner shell, the actual working part of the blaster, but I'm just trying to give myself a little more room to fit the air delivery pipe around the bottom of this head, so I'm chopping away as much as I can. If you do screw something up, I'm sure you can patch it up, but use your own judgment. In preparation for permanently assembling all this stuff together, you can see that I sanded the back of the Triad head. I sanded the front edges of this piece all around, as well as, oh, wow, that flew pretty far distance. I sanded up both. I sanded with again, all this was with low grit paper, high grit, with a rough sandpaper, and I went around this head, both in front of and behind this ridge, and I also sanded the inner lip right here of the plunger tube, just the front portion. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to permanently epoxy this piece in here with my plastic repair epoxy, as well as epoxy putty the front of this to the back of the Triad head, making this one big solid piece. Now I do plan to screw these two pieces back together with that screw in there. Again, because I plan for this to be permanent. If you want to be able to sort of repair this when you're later on, what you can do is leave that screw undone. Unless you drill a really big hole, you won't really be able to pull it out, but you can leave it undone, and you can, there will be several permanent connections in this blaster. There will be the connection from the plunger head through this, from the plunger tube through this piece to the Triad, which will be a very strong one. And then there will be the permanent connection from this hole here to this hole here using the some sort of air pipe, whatever you end up choosing to use. I still haven't figured out exactly what I'm going to use. This one will be much easier to remove, and once you remove this one, if you have some sort of error that you must absolutely fix later on or some kind of damage, when you remove the air pipe, you'll be able to slide the functional part of this head, which is, this back panel, and then it's got all the air restrictors and everything. You've seen that in a previous segment from this shell. You'll be able to do that, and this, the functional part will remain attached to the plunger head. It'll just be a lot easier for you to remove the air pipe connection, to cut that out and reattach it later, than it will be to try to separate the plunger tube from the Triad head itself at the back, and then try to fix it all up later. So make that choice whether or not you want to use that screw. I haven't decided if I will or not, but you got to think about that. So, as I mentioned, the most difficult part of this whole thing is making the air essentially go through a 90-degree bend, going down and then almost straight back up. So what I've worked out, I have this brass, this copper or brass elbow. I don't know exactly what size it is, but this might help you. This is 3/8 inch outer diameter by 1/4 inch inner diameter vinyl tubing. Now, the reason I'm not actually using this alone is because when you bend it, it flattens, and you lose all your airflow. So what I'm doing, this nests perfectly into this elbow. Additionally, actually no, wait, there's no additionally. So it goes in both sides. It's a little looser on this one, but I'll be able to snug it down with some hot glue or rubber cement, something like that. As so. And what I'm going to... The other thing I've done, you can see I've cut this at an angle. And the way this is going to work, and this takes some definite test fitting, I had to Dremel this out, the hole out a little bit more. And the way this fits in here is like that. And you can see it will accept the air pretty well. I just need to attach all this together and fill in all the dead space, seal up this end. I will cut it, stick it into the elbow, cut another piece, and then I'll have to stick that up into the triad head. So my next segment will probably be once all that is done. If not, I might show you a couple little pieces here and there of that process. A quick note, in preparation for the next step, I've used my ethyl rubbing alcohol and my cotton pads to, first of all, entirely wipe out the plunger tube. I'll be regreasing it later, but I don't want any of that any of those plastic shavings in there. Absolutely do not. I also got, of course, this inner lip that has been sanded. Same thing. I have rubbed down this entire thing inside and out, as well as the inside of this head, or the inside of that shell, as well as the outside around this air opening quite a bit, and this back side that I've sanded down for epoxy. Everything that's going to be epoxied or glued together, was sanded and rubbed down with rubbing alcohol. The reason I wiped down around here and in here is because since I am no longer using that black rubber stopper, I'm going to insert, I'm not quite sure where it is right now, I'll find it. I'm going to insert my rubber sealant in between these two things and fill it up, so I'd really like that to stick as well as it possibly can. I don't think I really need to sand it, but I still may. So my plastic repair epoxy went in very, very cleanly. There is actually none on the outside, and I didn't even have to wipe it off. I put a decent amount, not too much, but not too little, around the inner edge, pushed the cap in, and you can actually kind of see it yellow around there, filling in the holes, filling some dead space already. Very good. Also, my DevCon Home silicone adhesive, which I'm going to use as a sort of rubber cement gap filler, it's solidified inside the cap over time. It's just really interesting, so I'm going to have to see if I'll get anything usable out of this at all. So you can see here that I filled in all those gaps with my silicone adhesive. It is a very tricky thing to work with. Make sure you do not get it into the hole, into the air slot, because that will prevent the air restrictor from moving. In fact, something you want to be certain of, because I made this mistake, don't put even a little bit of adhesive right here inside the shell before you put the cap in, the air restrictor system in, because I've got a little bit of adhesive that's bleeding over into the air restrictor. So it really kind of sticks in there, and I can see it, and I don't like it there. But I've already got this together. This is a pain in the butt to do. So what I'm actually going to do is take this dart, coat it in silicone grease from Orange Modworks, stick it in there, and leave it in there until this has completely dried, because I do not want that air restrictor silicone glued shut. You can see I've got my plunger curing, as well as my air seal, along with my dart and silicone grease trying to prevent the air restrictor from being locked up. I've got that sitting aside. Now, I was going to put all this together tonight, but I'm going to wait for all the silicone adhesive to cure, and then clean this out with my rubbing alcohol and cotton swabs, because I want to see that this works, at least acceptably, before I go permanently putting all this stuff together, while I can still get at this. Now, the next thing is, I am not going to be padding the plunger, because the TriadStrike, along with many other Elite blasters, has this nice rubber cushion buffer here. I may throw in an Osnerf pad in there, maybe just to add some extra cush. But you can see there are 2 air release holes here. I'm leaving those there because I don't need every single ounce of air out of this thing. I know ounce isn't the appropriate unit, but anyway, I don't need to make this absolutely perfect. It works fine as is, and those are there. I'm going to leave those there as protection against dry firing, so that the air can still escape and it isn't trapped in there. I may Teflon tape the O-ring and certainly regrease the whole thing, but I haven't gotten there yet. Now, one thing about this is there's no easy way to get this plunger head off. There's not a screw. So something I learned online was that in order to add a spring or remove a spring, you have to, and I'll cut to this in a second, you essentially have to wind it off. And I've got a new spring here. This is a 7 kilogram Orange Modworks spring for the, wow, this is way out of focus, for the Strong Arm, TriadStrike, and Rough Cut. It is 2.5 times as strong as the original. Now, I am a huge fan of Orange Modworks springs, as everyone should be, and I think almost everyone is, because there's no guesswork involved. You know it'll fit the blaster, you know exactly how strong it is, you know how strong it is compared to the original spring. You don't have to go, and they're fairly cheap, considering you don't have to go guess and check and cut your springs. I like them. So this is twice the strength of the original spring, and that is because my air is going through an extra 90-degree bend. And so I really want to make sure this blaster still performs well. So I've got this double-strength spring, brute force engineering, putting as much air as I can through this already complicated, and now even more complicated, air delivery system from the plunger through the plunger head to the dart. Here you can see I am winding the original spring off. Now it's very tricky to get this to bend far enough. My fingernail certainly didn't cut it. I had to take my pliers, I had to grip the priming ring firmly with one hand and then use the other to grab with these pliers the bend in the first part of the spring really securely and bend it around the edge. So it's not easy, but it's certainly easier than trying to remove and then repair the plunger head.